This episode of Raw Green is brought to you by OBI, a sustainability consultancy firm specialized in life cycle assessment and decarbonization strategies. At OBI, we've designed our new Chief Sustainability Officer package to empower SMEs with comprehensive ESG solutions at a fraction of the cost compared to traditional solutions. Our entry package includes a full ESG report covering scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, a tailored emission reduction strategy, access to GRI certified software, and more. What sets us apart? Affordability. Our goal is to make sustainability accessible to businesses of all sizes. Contact us for a free consultation at info@oneob.com or through the links provided in the description. And now, get ready for the next episode of Raw Green. Ciao! Today, we're talking about packaging and more specifically about something that, especially during COVID restrictions, exploded: takeaway food containers and their environmental impact. The packaging industry is booming, driven by the demand for convenient on the go meals. But this convenience comes with a hidden cost for our planet. The global packaging market was valued at over 900 billion in 2020, and it's projected to continue growing. Yet, this growth isn't without consequences. From resource depletion and pollution to waste accumulation, the environmental impacts of packaging are significant and wide ranging. In the United States alone, it's estimated that more than 80 million tons of packaging waste are generated each year, with only a fraction being recycled. This waste not only fills up landfills, but also contributes to ocean pollution and greenhouse gas emissions. Our guest today is a distinguished expert in circular economy, serving as a professor in both circular economy and life cycle assessment at the University of Manchester. With over 70 publications, we will leverage his expertise to dig into the environmental impacts of takeaway food containers compared to reusable alternatives. We'll debunk some common misconceptions and explore how circular economy principles can transform packaging practices, paving the way for a more sustainable future. Please welcome Dr. Alejandro Gallego-Schmid.
Francesco. First of all, for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here today in your podcast to talk a little bit about packaging, circular economy, sustainability, and thank you for the invitation.
Thank you for being here, Alejandro, Alejandro. I had to do it. I had to
Yeah,
do it.
it happens to me roughly every week, kind of.
It sounds also very nice with the doctor before that. But anyway.
Yeah. So,
All right. Having done this beautiful introduction and ruin it rightly after, thank you for being here. And what I wanted to ask you it is, you run a research about takeaway food containers, and more specifically, what you and your team have done was a comparative life cycle assessment studying three different kind of takeaway packaging compared to the infamous Tupperware, the reusable packaging container. So why don't we start there? Why don't you give us a brief intro and overview of your research, and more importantly, what are the results of your research, and what surprised you? I'm interested also in that.
Sure, no problem. Well, basically, that study had two main parts. First of all, we want to compare the three most common takeaway containers. In order that people understand, one was polystyrene, which is the typical clam shell that we see for burgers, for example. In the UK, normally is from yellowish color. So I hope that everybody can figure it out, that kind of material. Then we have this uh, transparent, kind of like similar to a Tupperware, what are from but weaker, with this polypropylene, also very much used in takeaway restaurants. And then we compare that with the aluminium container, which is maybe people can figure it out. It's from aluminium, and it have normally a lid that is from paper, okay, and it's very typical, for example, from Chinese food.
Mm.
We get that with rice. So we have this container. We decided to compare these containers, because what you just mentioned before, the data, not only in the United States, in the European Union, is millions and millions of these single-use containers that
Yeah.
are used, and we wanted to compare these three. Uh, from that comparison, what we saw is that the one of polystyrene, the one that is from clamshell style, what was the that was the one that was the best in all the environmental impacts that we were considering. We were considering up to 12 different environmental impacts. And that's not, we apply this kind of quantification in different comparisons. And normally it's really weird that one product, is the best in all the impact categories. So that's
Yeah.
that's one of the first things that shocked me a little bit. The reasons for that is associated with the material itself. This polystyrene, it has a very low density. It's basically air.
Yeah.
In order that we understand. So it's very light. So we are using very few grams of materials.
Quantity. Yeah.
And the quantity is quite low. So when we compare with aluminum also, it was a similar weight, but as you and your listeners probably will know, the production of aluminum, it consumes quite a lot of
It's
energy,
energy intensive.
and
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
energy, the intensity produced that impact. That's the reason that it was better than aluminum. And in the case of the polypropylene, which is this kind of, again, transparent plastic box. The problem is that it's much more heavy, so you are
Mm.
using much more material, and the production of that material generates all these impacts. Uh, our study, and we mentioned that, has a caveat, a problem, is that nowadays, and I want to mention that from the beginning, we don't have an impact category that can measure the impact of uh, plastics in the oceans. Okay, and that's
Hmm.
that's a problem that we have. We are still developing that. Okay,
Interesting.
in our community. Yeah. So obviously, um, one of the when the with the impact, but you can measure what you can measure. So doesn't take validity, or make the study less interest. With the tools that we have at the moment, that's what we got. But obviously, one of the main problems from this polystyrene, this clamshell style um, container, is that even if it's, from the technical perspective, can be recycled, uh, in reality, the level of recycling is almost zero. And the reason for that is the same reason that makes it very beneficial from the point of the material, that we are using very low quantity of material.
Yeah.
As it is air, basically, it makes it very challenging from the economic perspective to recycle it, because you have to take quite a lot of amount of them, compact it, because otherwise you are transporting air to
Yeah.
recycling, so
Yeah.
you have to collect a lot, compact it, and then recycle, and that makes it quite difficult from the recycling perspective. So in all the impact categories, it's performing very well, okay, but with the caveat that we know that nowadays, plastic is arriving to the ocean. I can give you some statistics that are quite shocking, so that, for example, from packaging in general worldwide, only 40% of the plastic packaging is recycled, and only
40, 40,
5% is recycled. One four 14
14.
14 1 4 14,
That's
yeah.
very low.
So that's very low, and only 5% is recycled in plastics of the same quality, because the problem that we have with recycling of plastic is that in the ideal world, we will be able to separate the different plastics, but
Yeah.
that doesn't happen. So you mix plastics, and that reduces the quality of the recycled plastic. So you are getting recycled plastic, but not with the same quality. So only 5% of that. Because, maybe we got that perception because we are in the global north, that there is this a lot of amount of recycling, but worldwide, there is a lot of countries that doesn't have that infrastructure to recycle, and we are sending actually a lot of our waste to those countries that doesn't have that capacity of recycling. Not This is obviously not only for packaging, but in general. Okay. um, we start this podcast 10 minutes ago, so the United Nations has said that every minute we are throwing the equivalent to a huge um, truck of full of plastic to the ocean. So in this time we have sent already 10
10.
full trucks,
Yeah.
uh, 10 of plastic to the ocean, and at the level of plastic that we are sending to the ocean, and I'm not saying this, the United Nations is saying this, by 2050, there's going to be more plastic than biomass in the oceans. So there's going to be more plastic than fish, so obviously, that with this it blows my mind, no? So,
Yeah.
so obviously we have to do something about it. Okay. Well, saying that, that was a long answer. That was the first part of the study. But the second part, we always like to with my team, with Professor Adisa Zapajic was involved in that study, and also Dr. Joan Manuel Fernandez Mendoza. They were the collaborators in that study. We always like um, to bust a little bit some myths, and we saw that there was a lot of people or a lot of movement online. It's like uh, with good intentions, so it's to bring your own Tupperware to the takeaway restaurant. So what we did is, once that we calculate the environmental impacts, and again with the caveat that I mentioned before, the polystyrene one, it was supposed to be the best from the environmental perspective. How many times do you have to bring your Tupperware to compensate the impact of the single-use polystyrene? And the results were quite shocking, because for these 12 environmental impacts that we consider, for example, for climate change, I think you have to use it 16 times, 1/6. For consumption of resources, which is quite related with circular economy, it was
Mm.
more than 200 times. And actually, for one category, which was terrestrial ecotoxicity, you never can compensate the impact of the single-use container, because what people maybe don't think is that obviously when you are using the Tupperware, you have to clean it, and there are
Yeah.
some impacts associated every time that you
Usage
clean
of
it.
other
No, it's
materials.
associated with,
Yes. Water.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah, you use water, you use soap, you use normally hot water,
Yeah.
because we were talking about food, and you want to get rid of the oil, of the grease, and you use hot water, and the production of that hot water is coming from an energy that is still is coming mostly from fossil fuels, so it has an impact, and specifically for that um, impact category, those actions, those materials were having more impact than producing a single-use um, container. No,
Container.
uh,
Mm.
yeah, it was quite shocking. We got quite a lot of responses about that. And it's not that obviously I'm against. Not using the resources correctly, and I think a single-use packaging is not the best way of using resources. Plastic is a fantastic material. Don't get me wrong. It's like it has, but when you use it correctly,
Mm.
thanks to plastic, we're avoiding a lot of food waste. Imagine
Yeah.
the meat in the supermarket, without plastic. We will go to waste, and we will produce even more food waste that we are producing. It's a material that is
Think
cheap and
about
produced from the
pharmaceuticals. Think about also other
for
things outside of.
example,
Yeah.
or how we have reduced the weight of cars and planes, reducing the consumption of
Yeah.
fossil fuels, and thanks to this material. But the problem is when we don't use it correctly,
Yeah.
so if you use plastic um, from one plastic bag in the supermarket, that you use it for 5 minutes, and then, as we talked before, it is in the environment for hundreds or thousands of years. That's not the correct use of plastic. But so there was quite a lot of opposition to that, and obviously we are in favor of extending the life of resources and using reusable containers. But what we cannot do, what is not realistic, is to put that pressure in the consumer, in the sense that, like, Francesco, I'm sure that you are super conscious about environmental sustainability, and I'm as well. But it's not realistic that we are going to take 200 times or Tupperware to
To
the
the restaurant.
takeaway
Yeah.
content to the restaurant, and to clean it, and all of that. So we have to look for other options. And I think what is really realistic is something that uh, the that makes things easy to the consumer. I tend to think that people is good and want to do the right thing, but you have to make it easy. So I
Yes.
think it's
Totally.
much more rational that you try to install a system with a lot of restaurants, that have these reusable containers. So in the sense that if you go and uh, go to a takeaway restaurant and take a food that is 5 kilometers away from your home, that you take that container and you have a restaurant next to your house, where you can take that container and get your money back. Kind of like similar to these bike
Yeah.
systems, that
Same.
are in the cities, that you take it from one place and you can return it, and there is a system that they redistribute um, these bikes. And there are also other problems for the bring your own Tupperware, which is legal issues. Because
Yeah.
if you get food poison, and you want to denounce the restaurant, they can argue that is that you have not
You haven't
cleaned
washed it properly.
correctly.
Yeah,
Y-
yeah.
you didn't wash it
But look,
properly, so
look,
but
Alejandro,
if you
the
have that
yeah,
system, yeah,
the
if you have that
reusability
system that,
of
yeah.
the packaging has been something that it has been on the table for quite some time, not just food companies. I can give you an example of an industry that it has been very proactive onto this, and it is the freight forwarding or the distribution industry. I've seen
Mm,
some very forward thinking companies using packaging to do their delivery runs, which is reusable. It is traceable because they're all with tracking microchips installed, so they can also see
mm,
where each box is. And yes, like you said, it can be done with a deposit, let's say, system where you pay that first time for that container, and then it gets exchanged the next time. In a way, it is also a strategy to keep the customer closer to you because of that deposit. There is a
mm.
rolling deposit, right? So it becomes a
Yeah.
very nice strategy to keep it closer. But we go back to the manufacturer responsibility, right? Which is
Mm,
also a very hot and difficult topic. Who's responsible for what?
mm. Yeah, that's very very interesting. No, the standard product responsibility. So I think the the there has been that Machiavellic shift, in responsibility, to through to the consumer, and I mean, I always thought, and the European Union is in that line of thought, that the companies that put that product in the market should be responsible of taking care of what happened to that product at the end of life, because they are the ones that are benefiting of that.
Mm,
And if they have to pay for that, I'm sure they will look for alternatives, that are um, less expensive, But the problem is when we are all subsidizing, or they're taking care of that uh, um, uh, packaging or product at the end of life, So I'm not gonna say names of specific companies, but if you are a soft drink company and you are putting thousands of millions of plastic bottles, or if you are a um, shampoo producers and you're putting a lot of plastics in the market, you should be responsible of what happened to that
mm,
plastic and that packaging, because you are the one that are benefiting of that. You are the one that are putting that outside. So you have to take responsibility of that, and you have to pay for the systems that allow uh, that uh, packaging to be um, reused or recycled or treated in the correct way.
Yeah, that makes sense. At the same time, that would imply that manufacturers starts to design their products taking into account or into consideration into their designs also end of life treatments, which is very it's not easy to do. It is very
Mm,
costly from both a research perspective, a production, materials, a number of other things. So it has to be, obviously, as in everything, it has to reach a balance among different
mm,
requirements. But
mm,
what do you think it would be, let's say, a good direction to take? For example, let's stick with the example of your study. Okay, what do you
mm,
think companies should do, and what would you suggest to consumers in this case? Do you suggest them order only from restaurants that they have polystyrene takeaway because of their environmental footprint, or would you suggest, okay, if you want to order on the go meals and you want to bring your own Tupperware, you need to use at least 16 times? What would be your strategy, your suggestion here?
Well, that's obviously that's complex, But what I kind of mentioned it before, going towards business models, where we can have uh, a lot of uh, restaurants that accept a standard reusable container that is specifically designed for that purpose. That will be the ideal scenario, you know. And obviously there is a factor of a scale that will make this much more economically profitable. Something similar can be done to not only for um, this kind of fast food or takeaway containers, also for coffee shops as well.
Mm,
As a consumer, you know, again, I always thought, obviously we have to educate consumers, we have to be responsible consumers, but uh, it's like we tend to shame a lot consumers, and consumers at the end, they have a lot of things to worry about. What we cannot expect is that people that has a lot of things going in their life, they have kids, they have work, they have problems, that they dedicate hours of their day to study what is the most environmental or most sustainable
that's very true.
alternative. So
Yeah.
in the ideal world, you know what we should aim is that obviously that people is informed and take responsibility decisions, but that the products that arrive, the systems that we are offering, are already sustainable, are already circular, to the
Yeah.
consumer, and that's where policymakers and companies that again are the ones that are benefiting of that, So what is not the right thing is that companies are benefiting, of doing the wrong thing, because we are not taking into account the externalities that are associated to that product. So is and you mentioned something that is key, which is the design. I think that's something that is crucial. The Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which is one of who really started this circular economy movement, they are aiming to educate, I think, on like 1 million designers in circular economy, because I think that's
Okay.
key. We have to start to um, consider the end of life, the circularity, the sustainability as another parameter when we design things,
Life
because
cycle
everything that is
thinking.
surrounding us, yeah, and everything that we have around us is designed, and when things are designed, the designers are considering, like the economic costs, but also how it's going to be, if it's easy to use for the consumer,
Mm,
or if it's going to last enough, but also we have to start to include as another key parameter, like what's going to happen with that at the end of life, what
after.
is the sustainability of that,
Yeah.
that's key,
Yeah.
and when we do that, things will make much more sense, and it will be much more economically feasible, because it's much more difficult to solve something when the damage have done, but if you prevent it, if you consider from the beginning, like that you design a mobile, or you design a packaging in order that it can be easily recycled at the end of life, that's going to be much easier than having to go to the ocean to collect that plastic.
Yes, it is. Well, we have maybe we don't know that. It could be actually subject of a good research study. But well, I wanted to give you an example of an extreme example of this designing,
Sure.
which is I don't know if you heard of wind farm generators done in plywood
Hmm.
rather than in n number of synthetic materials and plastic and whatnot. We got wind
Hmm.
generators done in plywood, and there's a beautiful company that they develop and designed this. They said we are doing it from a life cycle perspective because even though it is wood, in the overall life cycle of the product, at the end of the life, we are able to reutilize 90 plus percent of the materials. While right now,
Hmm.
with the current design of wind generators, the most let's say
Yeah.
funny that I've seen it is creating like park benches, or maybe they use it to make
Hmm.
bridges, which is still a
Hmm.
beautiful and inventive way to reuse a product, but an issue. You mentioned before
Hmm.
policymakers. Ta-da. And what I wanted to ask you, it is legislators and regulations obviously often influence practices, okay? And in this specific case, packaging. How can
Hmm.
policymakers could leverage the LCA that you have done, the comparative LCA you've done, insights to develop more effective policies to reduce the environmental footprints of single use packaging or takeaway packaging?
Well, first of all, regarding policymakers, I think what is important is to try to homogenize regulations worldwide. A lot of companies that are multinational face the problem that like the regulations are very different from one country to another, from one region to another, or from one city to another. So, and I think in this case, for example, the European Union is a very good example. Try to homogenize to all the regulations. And first of all is to make not only I will go a step further, a step before, sorry, of like trying to incentivize this kind of things is to avoid that it's a burden. Sometimes the policies are a burden, because like instead of considering what it happens on the end of life as a resource, is considered a waste, and that produce a lot of burden to reuse this or recycle these materials. And I think specifically for this packaging, what I will try to, there's a lot of things that can be done from the policy perspective. One of them, it can be to increase the amount of recycled materials by law that this packaging has to have to contain. That's can be a policy trying to use renewable materials. That's from the, let's go through the life cycle now. So that will be in the materials that you have at the beginning. um, Regarding the production, try to, because we normally don't think of the indirect impacts. So uh, and a lot of these impacts, for example, in packaging, is associated to the energy that is used in the production. So if you indirectly are having policies that are towards more use of renewable sources of energy, you are gonna reduce the impact, not only obviously of plastic or any kind of packaging in general, but that's gonna affect the life cycle of the product. No? Then during the use, you know, go for policies, and I mentioned it already, that extend the life of that packaging, that you use it as many times as possible.
Yeah.
And at the end of life, when you have reuse, repair, remanufacture, refurbish as much as maximum those materials, go for an end of life that gives another cycle to that product. Can be recycling if we have a technical material, but also, and it's something that we can apply also for this kind of takeaway packaging. Why not for going for um, uh, packaging that is compostable,
Yeah.
and we can obtain some material at the end that is good for the soil, or we can go for anaerobic digestion that produce
Even better. Yeah.
leachate that can be used for fertilizer and energy, but
Yeah.
uh, obviously all of this is quite complex, because and they have to be a really nice harmonized supply chain. Normally somebody or a company that produce a product is not responsible of everything. No, they are not the ones that uh, do everything, that they do the packaging, that they do the product, that they do the use and the end of life. So, and I'm saying that because of for example, compostable containers. Okay, it's a great idea, okay, to have compostable packaging, but it's a great idea if that packaging ends in a compost facility,
Yeah.
because something that is compostable is not going to produce compost if it goes to landfilling or if it's incinerated.
Yeah.
So we have to create the channels in order that that compostable packaging ends in a compostable facility, and that's where companies and policymakers can influence quite a lot, in order that that ends where it
Very good
has to
point.
end.
Very good point. That makes the full circle. That makes the full circle.
Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, look, the thing is the way I see it, and it is a little bit unidirectional. It is that you need to know on a case by case scenario. You need to know on a case by case
Mm,
scenario. You can use
definitely.
the most environmentally friendly materials and the most compostable materials that can break down without even the use of a composting facility. They can compost at home in your pot.
Mm,
But if before
mm,
that those items are transported via air freight rather than
yeah.
sea freight, then it's probably better to use a aluminum or a virgin plastic one. So
No,
every and
definitely.
I it has to be on a case by case scenario until there is that
Yeah.
level of general knowledge that basically will help you to take informed decisions to help to keep as low as possible the environmental impacts of the product. So case by case.
And that's a very important point, Francisco, because I mean, and that's the reason why it's very difficult to transmit sustainability issues, because it's normally not black or white. There is gray areas,
Yeah,
because I mean, as I mentioned before, this was one of the only cases where we got that um, one of the products was the best in all the impact categories compared with the others, but also it has the caveat that I mentioned before, so
mm,
um, so it's very important to analyze case by case. And if like uh, for example, recycling, I have done studies where the recycling has more impact than the virgin material.
I believe you.
Is that is that the normal thing? No. Normally, as a common sense, like if you recycle something, you are going to have less impacts than extracting it from virgin materials. But there are some cases that just the recycling process has, because you are using a lot of energy, because you are using a lot of water, because you are using a lot of transport, you know, or because the recycling process is not efficient enough, that in some cases it makes sense, to extract the virgin material instead of recycling that one.
Yeah.
Or we have to look for other ways of recycling that, but the way that we are doing it is not better from the environmental
And
perspective. So I totally agree. We have to go case by case, and if you there is cases that we have this waste hierarchy, you know, that goes from uh, like the only best scenario always is not producing the waste at all, and that's the best. That's for sure. That's gonna be
yeah,
always the best scenario, and that's something that we don't talk too much about, which it can give to another podcast. We can do another episode about that, but it's consumption,
yeah,
and I think sometimes we don't address the elephant in the room, because it's not of interest, of companies, like we have to consume less. That's it, so
yeah,
and it's and and circular economy and everything that we are talking about is something that is going to help, you know but at the end, it's true that we are consuming too much, like if everybody consumes like somebody from the United States, we will consuming 5 Earths every the equivalent to 5 Earths every year, you know 5 times the capacity that the
yeah.
Earth has
Production
to
capacity.
regenerate.
Yeah, to
Yeah,
regenerate.
so
Wow.
so yeah, yeah, so that's it, so at the end, first of all, we have to think, do we really need that plastic bag? Can I do something to avoid that? And that's the first thing, and from there we can start to think, like, how can we expand the life, again, reuse, reduce, and then we have to analyze case by case, and initially composting, anaerobic digestion, or recycling is going to be better than incineration, particularly if that incineration do not recover energy, and better than landfilling. But we have to analyze case by case,
Yeah,
because again, maybe in some cases incineration, if it's done correctly and with the correct protections and with the correct filters to avoid emissions to the environment,
yeah.
uh,
Ashes
and that
management.
produce human
Yeah,
toxicity. Yeah,
yeah,
it's key, because it depends, what is going to that incineration as well. It's not the same that you are incinerating food waste, that you are incinerating plastic, etc., etc. So there's a lot of factors, and I totally agree with you that we have to go case by case,
case
because
by case.
something that if it's done correctly can be wonderful, can be a total mess if you are not doing it correctly.
Yes. Well, look, Alejandro, this was very very nice, and it is fascinating. Now we're talking about packaging, but think about on how many things you can apply the same principles. This morning I was thinking about cars. While keep going building new cars, while you can retrofit them, even electric. Actually, they're fantastic. Have you ever seen old
Yeah,
combustion engine cars retrofitted with the electric powertrains? They're amazing. They really are
mm,
amazing. So
it's
you
amazing.
save those emissions on the raw materials from the steel and aluminum and the plastic inside the car, and you can still make an electric vehicle that it is fantastic to have with a lower
And
environmental impacts
uh,
than a brand new vehicle. So, but you have to
and
communicate
you
this
know
stuff.
what, Francesco? You know what? It makes economic sense. That's the best
Mm,
thing of
mm,
all of this,
yeah,
because at the end, in the previous century, in the 20th century, you know, the cost of raw materials, was quite cheap, and that allowed us to keep producing and keep consuming virgin materials. But that has changed
yeah,
in in the last century. We are talking about materials that are scarce. We have seen, like um, how it affecting our lives. Like, for example, with with the pandemic. There was scarcity of certain materials. With the Ukraine war, it has been seen in whole Europe. How it has affect or the price of or energy, associated to the repercussions that it has, that war. So raw
It
materials
has
are
to
not that
change.
cheap. Uh,
It has to change.
yeah,
It
they
has to change.
it has to change. It has to
Do
change
do
because I
you
mean,
remember
and
when
I think
cell phones? Do you remember when we were kids and cell phones
yeah,
started and you had exchangeable batteries? Do you remember
yeah,
that our a phone were lasting years? Now you are
yeah,
basically obliged to change a phone every 2 years. Every two
yeah, and that's
years,
that's what that's where policymakers have to intervene.
and that's where
And
policymakers
and I
have to
think that
intervene.
yeah, that's not acceptable. That's
Mm,
not ethically correct. And and there are changes in that sense. For example, now the European Union is making that all the phones have to have the same time of charger. Didn't make
mm,
sense that like for an iPhone you have a different type of
yeah,
connection to charge it that for other phones. So from now on there is going to be a standard, and
yeah.
and and
USB-C.
obviously that's going to
Yeah,
reduce the amount of cables that you are going to have in. And again, like we have that's a clear example of poor design. Obviously with an intention, that is, that you keep buying, but at the same time there are other alternatives, that is starting to be in the market. And for mobiles, we have Fairphone, for example, that is a
the
company
Fairphone.
that
Yes.
yeah, that is I used to have a Fairphone as well,
How was
so
it?
um it was good. The thing is that I think, in my personal opinion, they have to is still expensive, for which is a barrier, to a lot of people. So it's like that purchase barrier. It has to be uh, sustainable, but it has to be, if we really want to make a change, it has to be affordable, that people can pay for it. And at the end, the problem is that for the same price you can get mobiles with better uh,
Performance. Yeah. Look.
specifications,
Yeah.
performance, but at the end it's because the other mobiles are not considering the negative externalities that the Fairphone is considering. And
Yes.
that's why the comparison is not fair. You know that mobile that costs you 200 pounds or 100 pounds, reflecting all the cost, the real cost. And I can put you a very very interesting example that, when my students come to the university, 18, 19, 20 years old, one of the first things that I do in my lectures is that I make them think, do you think, and again, I'm not going to say any specific company, but if you go and buy a t-shirt for 2, 3, 4, 5 euros, you know, do you think that cost can capture the getting the materials? Probably is produced in some place in Vietnam, Bangladesh, etc. The packaging, the transport to the shop, all the cost associated to indirect cost of the shop, lighting, the local, the
Yeah.
employees, do you
Marketing.
think
Yeah. Yeah.
the marketing that t-shirt, costing 2 or 3, 4, or with a cost of 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 pounds or euros, can be done without damaging the environment or at the cost of social and environmental aspects? Of course not. You know,
Mm,
and you tell them that. I'm talking about like awareness of the consumer, and you can see that their faces change because they never thought about it.
Yeah.
It was like, wow, I have 20 pounds. Well, I can buy 4 t-shirts. And first of all, do you need that t-shirt? Do you
Mm,
need 4 t-shirts? So, or you just need one or two of really good quality. And
yeah.
Francesco, we are a little bit older, and I
Yeah.
remember when I was a kid that you
Yeah.
just get like one jeans, one t-shirt per year, and you get the clothes from your brothers,
Yes, totally.
so
Well, I am the
that
eldest, so I was the one releasing.
okay, I'm the youngest, so and that's perfectly fine, but also that
Totally.
was associated to that the clothes were of better quality and they
Yeah.
last longer. The
Yeah.
problem now is that like your your siblings are not gonna get your t-shirts because they are not gonna last because they
No.
are made of poor quality, and and what generates all of that? A
Yeah.
lot of fashion textile
Yeah.
waste,
Yeah.
which is again is for another podcast, but like only 2% of the textiles are recycled in the world.
Jesus.
Only 2%.
Jesus.
That's crazy. I'm now in South America,
Hmm.
and in Chile, they have an area that is in the north of the country that is quite far from the capital. They have this free of taxes port, in order to
Free
like,
trade zones.
as
Yeah.
they are quite far from the country, yeah, free taxes zone. So it's a port. Basically, they receive this huge um, plastic bags full of textiles. It's in Iquique, in the north of Chile. So basically, this is coming from what people have donated, clothes that they are not using anymore. So they put it in big plastic bags and they send it here. They open them, they see the ones that they look nice to resell, which
Mm.
probably is like 5-10%, and the rest is going to the desert, the Atacama Desert in Chile. So I encourage you and all your listeners and viewers to go and check textile waste in the Atacama Desert, and you will see hectares and hectares full of textile waste that is throw to the desert there, and is terrible, terrible, terrible,
I'll
and
put it
that's
on
all
this one.
related with the same thing.
Yeah, I'll put it on this
Terrible,
one.
terrible.
Yeah, it is. But
Mm.
you're trying to do your part by giving the knowledge through your research and also through this
Mm.
episode of Raw Green, for which I thank you to for your participation, Alejandro, and
My pleasure.
Alejandro. I had to do it again.
Again,
Yeah, yeah.
at the beginning
Well,
and
at
at
the
the
beginning,
end,
at the end, for circular.
very circular, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Alejandro. This was great, and I look forward the next catch up with you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Francesco. It was I have a wonderful time. It was a pleasure to talk with you. I thank you again for the invitation. And yeah, happy to talk in the future again.
Yeah, we will have to do it. All right, you take care.
Take care.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Raw Green, brought to you by Obi. At Obi, we have designed our new Chief Sustainability Officer package to empower SMEs with comprehensive ESG solutions at a fraction of the cost compared to traditional solutions. Our entry package includes a full ESG report covering Scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, a tailored emission reduction strategy, access to GRI certified software, and more. What sets us apart? Affordability. Our goal is to make sustainability accessible to businesses of all sizes. Contact us for a free consultation at info@1ob.com or through the links provided in the description. See you at the next episode. Ciao.